Before the first star kindled in the void, before the Valar shaped mountains from chaos, there was Tom Bombadil. Neither darkness nor light held power over him, and even Sauron's ring was but a trinket in his hands. Through countless ages he walked his realm, content with songs and simple joys. This is the untold tale of the Eldest. In the first moments of Middle-earth's existence, when the music of the Ainur had just taken physical form, the world emerged as a realm of chaos. Vast sheets of fire burst from the ground without pattern. Endless storms raged across skies that had never known stars. Mountains rose and crumbled in the space of moments. Rivers changed course with each passing day, carving new valleys only to abandon them. In this primordial chaos, before the Valar arrived to impose order, Tom Bombadil was here. Eldest, that's what I am. Mark my words, my friends. Tom was here before the river and the trees. Tom remembers the first raindrop and the first acorn. He made paths before the big people and saw the little people arriving. He was here before the kings and the graves and the barrow-wights. When the elves passed westward, Tom was here already, before the seas were bent. He knew the dark under the stars when it was fearless, before the Dark Lord came from outside. Tom brought hints of stability to his chosen territory. Where his feet touched burning ground, the fires cooled and earth solidified. When his voice rang out, the endless storms parted. Trees that sprouted and died in minutes instead took root and grew. Rivers that had carved 1,000 different paths settled into stable courses. When the rest of Middle-earth churned in chaos, Tom's domain became the first place where order took hold. The arrival of the Valar brought the changes to Tom's world. As these mighty beings shaped mountains and carved valleys, Tom's realm began to take defined form. Their powers reshaped the landscape. Yavanna's touch made forests grow in ordered ways. Auli's craft raised mountain ranges, and Ulmo's will carved rivers through ancient stone. Yet, within his domain, Tom maintained his own authority. Whether the Valar noticed him remains untold in any tale. During the years of the lamps, when Iluin and Ormal cast their light across Middle-earth, Tom simply sang his songs as he had since the first days, unchanged. When Melkor cast down the lamps and darkness returned to Middle-earth, Tom's realm remained a sanctuary of order in a world of chaos. His verses rang through the shadows, neither seeking the Valar's aid nor requiring their light. The years of the trees brought new life to Middle-earth, as Yavanna's light crept eastward from Valinor. Forests thickened beneath this strange radiance, creatures multiplied in the warming air, and the first hints of consciousness stirred in the woods. Tom's influence adapted to these changes. His songs now guided living things. Trees that might have grown wild and dangerous under the new light instead grew straight and true within his domain. Animals that turned fierce beyond his borders remained peaceful in his presence. The first elves awakened and began their great journey westward, and they witnessed Tom's power firsthand. The oldest elven songs still remember their first encounters with his realm. Ancient trees moved aside at their passing, swayed by distant melodies that echoed through the woods. Spirits that dwelt in stream and stone heeded a voice they could not yet hear. The very air seemed charged with ancient power. The elves named him Eowyn ben Adar, the oldest and fatherless, for even their earliest memories found him already ancient and established in his power. Bombadil, if indeed this is still the same that walked the woods and hills long ago, and even then was older than the old. That was not then his name. Eowyn ben Adar we called him, oldest and fatherless. In the First Age, while dragons scorched the northern kingdoms and Balrogs led armies against elvish cities, Tom's realm stood inviolate. The great battles that shattered mountains and drowned entire lands stopped abruptly at his borders, as if meeting an invisible wall of song. When Morgoth unleashed his dragons and demons across Beleriand, even these mighty creatures gave his forest wide berth. No dragon's fire could touch his trees. Their flames died at his borders as Tom's verses turned their heat to morning mist. No dark creature dared cross his boundaries, for those few who tried found themselves turned around by cheerful songs that filled them with inexplicable dread. Perhaps even the Valar noted this curious island of peace amid their war, though if they wondered about its master, they kept their thoughts to themselves. Yet when the Valar themselves finally marched to war, bringing destruction that dwarfed even Morgoth's devastation, Tom's response remained characteristically simple. While their armies clashed with the Dark Lord's forces, reshaping continents with their battle, Tom walked his paths unchanged. As mountains crumbled into the sea nearby, he gathered herbs along the Withywindle, singing to keep its waters clear and sweet. While ancient lands sank beneath the waves, he danced in his meadows, his steps ensuring flowers would bloom the next morning. Even as kingdoms drowned and armies perished around him, Tom could be seen rescuing rabbits from floodwaters, leading lost deer to higher ground, and teaching birds new songs to drown out the distant sounds of war. For centuries after the Great War, Tom's forest knew peace, until a new power arose from the sea. In year 600 of the Second Age, the first Númenórean ships appeared off the coasts near Tom's forest. These were not dragons or demons that could be turned aside with cheerful songs, but men with steel in their hands and purpose in their hearts. Their great fleets, towering like floating fortresses, required massive amounts of timber. Within days of their landing, the first axes rang against ancient trees. The Númenóreans established their primary shipyard at Lon-Dare, where the Gwathlo River met the sea. Their logging operations expanded rapidly inland, following the river's course deep into the primeval forest. The destruction advanced methodically. Woodsmen struck into the forest's heart. Their iron axes, forged with techniques brought from Númenor, could fell trees that had withstood storms for millennia. Work crews dragged massive trunks through newly cut roads, leaving deep scars in the earth. Smoke from countless saw pits darkened the sky. The shipyards of Lon-Dare grew into a vast complex, consuming hundreds of acres of ancient woodland each year. Tom Bombadil witnessed the beginning of his realm's reduction. While woodsmen cut into the forest's edges, he walked its deepening shadows, his songs now carrying notes of power that made trees bend away from settlements, guiding their growth inward rather than letting them fight back. When they struck deeper, Tom appeared at their camps, making tools mysteriously fail and paths mysteriously change. Those who ventured too deep found themselves turned around, emerging back at their camps with no memory of the journey. But the Númenóreans were relentless, their blood carrying the strength of men who had fought Morgoth himself, their spirits blessed by the Valar's gifts. Where axes broke, they forged stronger ones. Where paths twisted, they marked new routes. Where men wandered lost, they sent teams of 10 to replace them. Season after season, year after year, their lumber camps crept forward like an unstoppable tide, until even Tom's subtle defenses could no longer hold back the advance of progress. By 1700 of the Second Age, the Númenóreans' timber operations had reduced Tom's domain to a fraction of its former size. The great forest that once stretched from the misty mountains to the sea now existed only in isolated pockets. The old forest remained the largest of these, protected partly by its distance from the shipyards and partly by the growing malice of its inhabitants. In this remnant of ancient woods, decades of retreat had left their mark. The trees that survived grew bitter and vengeful. Ancient oaks twisted their trunks into threatening shapes, their branches coiled like serpents ready to strike. Thorny undergrowth sprang up overnight, thick enough to trap unwary travelers. The forest's edge pressed against the high hay that protected Buckland, roots probing for weaknesses, branches reaching over like grasping hands. In the heart of these darkening woods dwelt Old Man Willow, a tree spirit from the world's beginning. Its massive grey trunk bore splits like hungry mouths, while its roots spread through the soil along the Withywindle River, creating treacherous ground that looked solid but could swallow a traveller whole. The ancient willow became the forest's dark heart, channeling all its bitter memories of axes and fire. Tom walked these shadowed paths daily, his presence maintaining a delicate balance. Where trees threatened to march against settlements, His voice would ring out clear as morning bells, turning their wooden limbs away from violence. He appeared without warning when needed, here dancing between angry oaks and a woodcutter's camp, there humming Old Man Willow to sleep as travelers passed nearby. For centuries, this delicate balance held. Then, in 1636 of the Third Age, while plague ravaged the lands of Cardolan and emptied its settlements, a new shadow crept toward Tom's borders. The Witch King, Lord of Angmar and eternal enemy of the Northern Realms, saw an opportunity in the ancient burial grounds east of the Old Forest. These downs held more than just tombs. They were the final resting place of Cardolan's royal line and their greatest warriors, a symbol of Dunedain power in the north. With the kingdom weakened by plague and its defenders scattered, the Witch King knew that defiling these sacred grounds would strike a devastating blow to any hope of Cardolan's resurrection. He sent forth evil spirits to inhabit these barrows, creating wights whose touch froze blood and whose voices paralyzed with terror. The Downs became a realm of horror. Endless mists shrouded ancient mounds, travelers vanished without trace, and cold voices called the unwary to their doom. Yet where the Downs met Tom's forest, this darkness found its limit. The wights' mists dissolved at his borders like morning dew. Their cold voices fell silent where his influence began. Tom simply walked his boundaries as he always had, humming tunes that seemed to bend the very air, and no dark spirit, however mighty, dared cross the invisible line his presence drew. In the autumn of 3018 of the Third Age, while 9 Black Riders hunted for the One Ring, 4 hobbits fled from the Shire into the Old Forest. Frodo Baggins carried Sauron's ring, while Sam, Merry and Pippin accompanied him on his desperate escape. The ancient trees of the forest closed in around them, their paths twisting and changing, herding the hobbits deeper into danger. Old Man Willow loomed by the Withywindle River, its ancient grey trunk casting deep shadows over the water. As Frodo and Sam's eyes grew heavy in the afternoon warmth, the willow's branches moved with deliberate stealth. In an instant, they lashed out like striking snakes, wrapping around Merry and Pippin's arms and legs. The hobbits' screams cut short as they were yanked backward into the willow's gaping splits. Wooden jaws began to close inch by inch, the sound of cracking bark mixing with muffled cries for help. Then Tom came dancing through the undergrowth, his blue jacket flashing between the trees, yellow boots kicking up autumn leaves. He stopped before the willow and sang out bright and clear, his voice ringing through the clearing like morning bells, and the willow's branches snapped back as if struck by lightning, its trunk groaning as the splits wrenched wide open. Merry and Pippin tumbled out onto the grass, gasping for air, and Tom bid them follow to his house nearby. "Did I hear you calling?" "Nay, I did not hear. I was busy singing. Just chance brought me then, if chance you call it. It was no plan of mine, though I was waiting for you." In his house, while the hobbits were resting, Frodo drew forth the One Ring, wrought by Sauron in the fires of Mount Doom. Tom reached for it without hesitation or fear. He held it up to candlelight, slipped it on his finger, yet remained solid and unchanged. When Frodo himself donned the ring and vanished from sight, Tom's eyes found him at once, seeing through its veil of shadows as if it were morning mist. The ring that had bent the will of kings lay powerless in Tom's hands, no more than a golden circle gleaming in the firelight. Days later, the hobbits took their leave of Tom's house, setting out for the East Road. Cold mists crept around them as they crossed the ancient burial grounds. The wights seized them in that grey twilight, dragging them deep into their burial chambers. There in the cold dark, these servants of the Witch King laid them upon stone slabs, pale swords across their throats. Ancient verses filled the air, spells meant to bind their spirits to the tombs forever, as countless others had been bound before. Tom's voice broke again. The wights fled before his coming, their power broken, and he led the hobbits from their cold tomb into the warm sunlight. Once more they bade him farewell, this time at the borders of his land, where his power ended and their long road eastward began. And Tom returned to his forest paths, to Goldberry and his daily walks, while greater matters stirred in the wider world. In October 3018, as autumn leaves turned gold in Rivendell's valleys, lords and representatives from every free people gathered at Elrond's summons. The discussion turned to Tom's nature when Erestor raised the matter of entrusting the ring to Bombadil's keeping, noting his immunity to its influence. But Gandalf and Glorfindel spoke against this counsel. Through all the ages of Middle-earth, Tom had remained within his borders, tending only to his own domain. The great events of history passed by his woods without drawing his attention or aid. His power, though great, served only to protect and preserve his chosen lands, said Gandalf. Say rather that the ring has no power over him. He is his own master, but he cannot alter the ring itself, nor break its power over others. And now he is withdrawn into a little land, within bounds that he has set, though none can see them, waiting perhaps for a change of days, and he will not step beyond them. The council weighed these matters carefully. Though Tom's realm might keep the ring safe for a time, his very nature made him unsuitable as its guardian. The same indifference that rendered him immune to the ring's corruption would also blind him to its importance. In his keeping, Sauron's greatest weapon would be treated with no more regard than a leaf upon the wind, forgotten until the hour when remembrance mattered most. The question of origin. The questions of Tom Bombadil remained. What power could stand outside the very music that shaped Middle-earth? How could one being remain untouched by both shadow and light, neither serving nor opposing the great powers? And why would such an ancient force choose to dwell in so small a realm, content with songs and seasons while the world turned? In seeking answers, scholars first turned to the Maia, those ancient spirits who served the Valar from the beginning. Like Melian in her realm of Doriath, his songs alone held power to drive back shadows and bind dark creatures at his borders. As Ossa ruled his appointed waters with authority absolute yet bound to those depths, so too did Tom hold mastery within his forest bounds. And as Gandalf and Sauron walked between shadow and light, Tom's sight pierced all veils between the seen and unseen worlds. Yet memories of an older world whispered of deeper origins. In the way of Ungoliant who crept from the void before the first dawn, Tom dwelt beyond the ordered powers of Arda. As Ungoliant's endless hunger once threatened Morgoth himself in the depths of Avathar, so did Tom's authority within his realm stand equal to Sauron's greatest works. He was ancient beyond reckoning, dancing in nameless forests before the Valar first entered Middle-earth. Some whispered that he might be a power that escaped even the knowledge of the Valar, born from the thoughts of Iluvatar before the great music began. Others wondered if he might be a spirit of Middle-earth itself, risen from the very stones and waters of Arda in its first shaping. Yet Tom offered no answers to these riddles, and seemed to care little for the questioning. While others sought to unravel the mystery of his nature, he continued his walks and songs, as unchanging as the hills and as free as the morning breeze. As the Fourth Age dawned and magic began fading from Middle-earth, Tom's power showed no decline within his borders. His songs still commanded the oldest trees, his voice still broke ancient curses, his presence still banished dark spirits. Yet his realm faced new threats. As men's kingdoms expanded, their need for timber and farmland pressed against the edges of the old forest. The Brandywine River, once a wild boundary of Tom's domain, saw increasing boat traffic. Settlements crept closer to the forest's edges. Some travelers spoke of a forest growing darker, more watchful. The trees pressed closer together, their shadows deeper, their whispers more menacing. Ancient powers gathered in the valley of the Withywindle, as if the very heart of the old forest prepared for a final stand against the encroaching world of men. Others told of a woodland growing merrier, its paths wider and welcoming. They claimed to hear distant laughter on the wind, and said the trees danced more freely than ever, as if celebrating some secret joy. Which tale rang true, none could say, for the old forest kept its own counsel, and Tom's ways remained beyond reckoning. His power had faced the greatest forces of each age, yet he had chosen to wield it only within his small realm. While dragons laid waste to kingdoms and dark lords rose and fell, he walked his forest paths unchanged. For in Tom dwelt a mystery older than dominion itself, a power that remembered when freedom meant not to rule, but to be.